I was in high school, I was hung around black people because they were amazing. I had never met a black person until I went to high school. And so the first person I met became my best friend. And he became an orthopedic surgeon, as a matter of fact. He became a pediatric surgeon for the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. He's a brilliant man and a great athlete, Columbus McAlpin. And he used to tell me about, he says, listen, it's great. He says, if you're black, he says, you can do whatever you want. Because I was asking him, he says, why is it that all of us, your friends, they walk down the street singing and dancing? I said, I love MJ musicals, but nobody ever does that in real life. And he said, he says, if you're black, people are going to be down on you, man. He said, you can be the smartest, coolest person, the nicest person in the world, they're going to be down on you. Or you can be the worst screw up ever, and they're going to be down on you. So, you're free. You can do whatever you want. They're going to be down on you anyway. So, I learned a lot about what that sort of meant, to be separate from society. But anyways, I went in the Army, and I want to just make a couple of points about it. Going to Vietnam was part of being a Japanese American. I remember my mom telling me, she said, I don't care if you don't like this war, I don't think you think it's a wrong war. This is your country calling you. You answer the call. It's just that simple. And she was kind of hard, believe me, I adored my mom. I idolize her to this day. But she would say stuff like, don't you ever come home a coward. I'd rather you came home dead. And that was part of the ethos, right? I mean, the 442, anybody knows who's lived through that period of time in the Japanese American community. And so I do pay tribute to the JCL for hanging tough during that period of time and continuing on and being a great civil rights organization today, going through whatever struggles they had to go through to try to keep us together as a community and keep us focused on the future in terms of social justice and the things that we're around for, the things that we can make a difference on. We have to be involved. We have to be a part of it. We have to be engaged in the dialogue, and we have to be aware of the changes as they're evolving. We got to be participating. You have to do this thing. I can't suppress it any longer. It was not possible. It was either do or die, is the way I looked at it, and I really meant that. I said, I don't care what I lose. I don't care what's going to happen to me. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to finally be myself. I don't care who doesn't like it. And so what I did was, for those of you who are thinking about coming out, I want to encourage you, because coming out is the most revolutionary thing you can do. It is the thing you can do to change the world. Coming out liberates everybody. Liberates all your friends, your family, all the people that see you, the people that know you. Liberate them all. So what I did was I talked to my family, because right, your family is the first group that has the largest investment in you staying exactly the same. So I started coming out to them one by one. Everybody was, I'm not going to say they were comfortable with it. They reached their détente with my position and who I was. But I can't sit there and say, oh, I had a couple of nephews and nieces. The next generation is terrific. They embraced it. Well, my siblings did not. I'm not going to kid you. Matter of fact, I got one brother, and I talked about it with Scott at the JCL. It's like, his name is Greg, and he went to UCLA. I love him dearly. And when I first talked to him, he said, you're going to do what? I said, I'm going to change my sex. I'm going to be going through the process. I just want to let you know, face to face. And he goes, look, I'm not your brother anymore. I don't want you ever to talk to me. You keep away from every single member of my family right now, and I'm never going to talk to him again. I kind of expected that from him, because he's kind of that way. I said, well, true story. I said, this is the last time I'm going to talk to you. I want to thank you, because you were the rebel of the family. You're the one that taught me I didn't have to be what everybody wanted me to be. Thank you, bye. That was like 15 years ago. He hasn't spoken to me since. He never will, probably. It's okay. I love him. I wish the best for him. He couldn't keep his family away from me. His 3 kids. Tony, Brian, Kurt, right? They've been in bands with me for the last 10 years. We've been rocking and rolling on the streets. I can't keep those guys away from me. All of them have been great. His wife was great. He's the only one that's still holding out. He's one of these guys. And I use this analogy back. You have to be around a lot of years to remember. You remember the Japanese soldier that hung out in the Philippines 50 years after the war was over? They had to get the guy's commanding officer to get him out of the jungle because, the war ended in the 40s. These guys are still back there, whatever, the 90s, And that's my brother, Some people take great pride in holding on to something regardless of the reason why they're holding on to it in the first place. You know what I mean? Some people hold a grudge forever. That's my brother. I just wonder about what kind of a burden that is for somebody to be hanging on to something kind of that ugly. You know what I mean? I encourage people, don't hang on to grudges. That's a waste of your energy, and it's like it's like they say, it's like some fool is hanging out in your head rent-free, and you haven't evicted him yet. You know, get rid of that person. So then I went to my clients. I wanted to go to my clients next to let them know what was going to happen. So what I did was I called up a lawyer on the East Coast. I'd never heard of a transgender lawyer before. And I said, look, I've got clients, and I've got cases, and I'm a lawyer. And I've heard that you transition from male to female. She said, well, yeah. He said, well, what should I expect? She says, well, expect to lose your friends, your cases, all your professional organizations, and most of your family. Really? I remember hanging up the phone thinking, I'm really in for it, man. This is going to be bad. But it wasn't that bad, and I was prepared for that, basically. Let me just say this, I was ready to give it all up. And so I just went and did it. I went out, and I started changing my presentation. I've always had long hair. I was known as the dude with the long hair back in the day. But I started changing my presentation. I started changing how I dressed, how I groomed myself. And so I remember going to court the first time. Well, let me tell you about my clients were interesting. I had really held off transitioning for about 15 or 20 years because I was always worried about letting my clients down. I really wanted to make sure that I took care of them and that nothing I did would harm their chances in the cases. So I went to every single one of them face to face, and I said, I'm going to be changing my sex. I know this is kind of a bait and switch. You know, started off, you hired a guy, and you're going to get a woman. And I said, I know some of the best lawyers in LA. I will find you somebody really good. If you can't continue with me, I completely understand it, and I will find you a really good lawyer. And they'll finish the case. They'll finish what I started. And this is the most amazing part of it, was every single one of my clients said, well, they actually said the same thing. They all said, no shit, man. You really gonna do that? I said, yeah, that's what the other guy said to them. And then they said, no problem. You know, we want to stick with you. Why would I want to be with somebody else? And I have to admit, I was moved to tears by how little I had expected from my clients. I mean, these guys were like really tough gang guys. I had 3 different murder cases. One guy was a death penalty case. I thought for sure that they would say, don't forget that. You know, I'm not going to get represented by somebody like that. But every single one of them stuck with me, and I was so touched by that. I really feel blessed that I had great clients. I love them so much, and it made me want to fight for them even more, even harder, even more committed, more intensely. Felt even more loyal. Then I went to the judges. I sent letters to the ones I thought were the more right-wing ones. I knew that some of the more liberal ones were not going to give me a problem with it. I obviously didn't think. But I sent letters to the more right-wing ones. And I remember going to this one judge. Every courthouse has got a hanging judge, right? All the people in the public can tell you that. Every courthouse there's a hanging judge, and there's someplace that's the guy that you don't want to go to if you got a criminal case. So I had this guy. And I walked into his courtroom, and I dressed. Went through the case, and motion or heard motion. Got the next day. I said, Judge, I sent you a letter. And he goes, oh, no, don't worry about it. He says, I think you'll do a fine job in the case. I said, if there's going to be any prejudice to my client, I don't want to continue with this case. I want you to take me off the case if there's any way that it's going to prejudice my client. And I said, no, I think you're going to do a fine job. But he says, I read the part, there was an article written about me in the Daily Journal. And that was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because it notified every single person in my little community what I was going to do. And so he said, I read the article, and he said, I read the part where you said that you felt that you couldn't have lived if you couldn't die as a woman. And then he started tearing up. And this guy is the guy that carries a gun underneath his robes because everybody hates him so much. But I mean, when he started tearing up, my client's jaw dropped, his eyes popped open. The lawyers who were back along the road behind me at the bar were also, they had never seen that from this guy. He had to go back into chambers to compose himself. I was thinking, whoa. But after the article came out, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because people were lined up. I'd walk into court, and the people would be lined up at the bar to give me a hug and a kiss to congratulate me. The guys were like, I got your back, homie. Women were like, you know, welcome to the club. It was amazing, the response I got. I was so touched by these people. I thought for sure that I was going to get some grief, and I did. Don't get me wrong. There were people that actually turned their back on me, and it was okay. One of the things I've learned about this whole experience about coming out is that it really tells you who your friends are, basically. It tells you who the people are that you need to care about, you need to consider, and the people that are, for the most part, wallpaper. They're just wallpaper. They're just out there. And you try to ignore them as best you can. And there's some great people that you need to take care of, that you need to be concerned about, that you need to give them back the love they've been giving you. So I did learn a lot from that process. The people that, there's a variety of responses. And Scott and I were talking about this because I got, over the last 15 years since I came out, I've seen a whole bunch of different responses. Most responses, like I said, were good. A lot of people, because they just don't know how to deal with it, kind of pretended they didn't see it. They kind of pretended they didn't even know me, as a matter of fact. I knew a friend that waited 10 years before he could tell me. He says, you know, when I first saw you dressed like that, I didn't know what to say or do, so I just kind of pretended I didn't know you. And he says, I want to apologize for that. I said, don't worry about it. I said, you know, people have got such an amazing array of reactions to that thing, and I don't expect, I'm not entitled to expect any particular reaction. And no way in the world does anybody have a right to anticipate the reaction I got, which is so good. It's, I mean, I'm here. I always think about, you know, you invited me out here, and I really do appreciate it. And just the fact that you invited a transgender woman to your event is historic. It's epic on my part. The fact that I get to get up and talk to you about it and tell you how I felt and what I went through and how I feel about this entire experience and talking about it is extraordinarily liberating. When I first went to court, the very first day I put on a dress, took off my three-piece suit and my tie, and decided to come to court dressed, my attitude was, I'm going to liberate the criminal courts building. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change the way they look at this population of people. And I kind of did. I mean, there was some eyes popping and, you know, when I first walked in to get to the elevators. I walk into court with my client, and the first thing the DA says, so what do we call you now? I thought, that's the best question I could have gotten. You know, I call myself Mia now. I'm not Mike anymore. I guess I'm still that person, but I'm in a different incarnation, and I do appreciate the fact that you asked me what name it is. And let me just give you one little thing about that. Transgender people love to be called by their new name, because they've rejected that old name and that old identity. It's still them, but they just really appreciate being called by the name that the transgender person has chosen. So it's a great act of grace and courtesy to go ahead and use that name. And the pronouns do matter. They matter a great deal. To be referred to by female pronouns, for me anyway, is a great honor. And for people to continue to refer to me by male pronouns is kind of a dig in the ribs. It's kind of jarring. When you hear it, it is either negligent, which is, you just tell them, okay, just kind of correct them very nicely, or it's hostile. It's people that refuse to accept your change, your transition. And I just think that it's up to the individual how you deal with that, but I know how I look at it, I know how it feels. After my transition, again, after going to the criminal courts building, it wasn't bad. Then I said, okay, now we're going to liberate the jail. Now we're going to liberate the police department, the DA's office. We're going to liberate every court in Los Angeles County. And you got to go in with that sense of mission, because that makes it a lot more fulfilling, I can tell you. But when all that happened, it all came down to something else, which is how much of my life could I continue to claim after transition? And I can say that I'm continuing, I'm involved with every community organization that I was involved with before my transition. And there are some friendships that you do lose. One of my best friends, actually, very publicly in a group just like this with a larger crowd even than this, decided to basically come down on me for how dare you call yourself a woman. You know, I'm a woman lawyer. I have been through what a woman has to go through to be in this spot. You know, how dare you take that up? And she got a point there, actually, because I did not go through what she went through. And I do believe that I have benefited from male privilege my whole life. But I feel like she may be right about that. I had my own struggles, actually, the way I look at it, you know what I mean? But the fact that she sort of like lambasted me publicly, I remember thinking that that was, for one thing, it was kind of a surprise that it came from her, because she was like a friend of mine. But then at the same time, I understood too that there's, again, you come out and you find out who your friends are, you find out who everybody is, really, in a sense. You have to kind of test them out. I'm kind of aggressive that way. I might come up to people and say, hello, how you doing? And, you know, I want to let them know that I just want them to get over the shock of this, and let's go back to business as usual. However, I do like you to use my new name. The pronouns don't just matter to me, they matter to all transgender people. I can tell you that's one of the more uniform things that I learned too in my process. Because I can tell you that when I got out of law school, I finally was able to afford therapy. So naturally, I was in therapy for a number of years. First started off with like war stuff, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder and that kind of therapy, which was one thing. And then eventually my therapist got me over to a gender identity specialist, somebody that was dealing just with gender dysphoria, which is what they used to call it, and then the DSM. And I remember my first therapist, I was with him for a year. He was really a good therapist, but I guess I just didn't know it. He was testing me, counseling me, and he took me through something which he called the Benjamin scale. There was a clinician by the name of Harry Benjamin, about 1900, who started studying transgender people, and he came up with a scale from 1 to 10. And if you're down at 1 or 2, then you're a normal person, because most normal people have some disagreement with the sort of strict dichotomy that is placed upon gender. And there's always a certain amount of rebellion at the bottom, and someplace I guess there's not. But if you're up at about an 8 or 9, then you're probably destined for surgery. You're probably destined for a transition at minimum. And so of course when he told me that, I fired him. I said, I was looking for a cure there, homie. This is not even me any good. So it's interesting, because then I got into therapy with a series of therapists, but I also got into group therapy. And I got into groups, you know, support groups for transgender people, for people with gender identity disorder. And it was really interesting to watch the attrition there. I have never seen so many unhappy people in my life. People that came in, sent by their wives, sent by their families, to try to get them straight. And the more of us that there were over the course of that first 5-year period when I was in group therapy, the less I saw of people. People were being murdered. People were committing suicide. The rate of attrition was over 50%. Something like 60% of that group that I was in to begin with either died through murder or through suicide. And even to this day, in my community, I see people being brutalized, maybe not murdered, but certainly beaten, and accosted on the street and treated very badly. And it is just a part of, I guess it's a part of why I'm here. I wish that being transgender could be as normal, or become as normal as anything else. Because I remember when I first came out, it was such an odd thing in my community. There had never been a transgender trial lawyer any place in California. Now there's some. There's a lot of people that came out. I'd like to think I had a little bit to do with that. If they were able to come out, I made room for them, and I'm trying to make room for them now. But I remember people would come up to me and say, well, you know, I'm gay, you know? And I was thinking, you know, being gay, that's like telling me that you're 1/8 Cherokee. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but it's not that profound in a sense, because nowadays it's, you know, not that bad, you know? But I guess everybody's got something that they're kind of holding back, I guess, and that's what I gave them permission, basically. They could see how far I went with it, that they could open up to me, and I really appreciated that, to be honest. You know, I do feel like I'm part of the larger community. I'm really thankful to the LGBT community for including the transgender people, because we are a very tiny minority. And that's one of the reasons why, when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about intersectionality of ethnicity and gender identity and sexual orientation. And what it really is sort of like a synergy of oppression. It's where you come from and the different ways in which you can be attacked, and you can be marginalized, and you can be minimized. And that I would like it to see that when I walk up to somebody and say I'm transgender, well, they say, gee, that's just like sort of like being 1/8 Cherokee, you know? That's kind of interesting, but it's really not that unusual, and it's not that exotic. I mean, if you're Asian American, you just hate being exotic. Because it's like, it's important to us, but we don't want it to be important to everybody else. You know, you want to be known for who you are. I mean, it is important. We have pride. It's great, right? I mean, it's like in certain things, Lenny Bruce used to talk about being Jewish, right? He used to say that, I'm not glad I'm Jewish, I'm not a masochist, but I'm proud. I made a good adjustment, and this is back in the 40s and 50s. I'm Lenny Bruce. But I wanted to talk mostly about what it has been since then. That I actually get invitations. People like Scott, Dr. Nakamura actually invites me to come out and talk to you. And I think it's just really important that you meet somebody, one of us from the community. And I'm ready to take whatever flack I've got. I always have been. I've always said that, if you've got some grief, go ahead. Although I will caveat, if you got something bad to say about me, say it behind my back. It's actually less upsetting if I don't have to hear it, to be honest. What's next on the schedule? I don't even remember. Okay. I just like to close by I talk to students all the time, by the way, and I'm a pretty offensive speaker with certain things. I know when I get around prosecutors, they just hate when I say some of the stuff I say. But I have law students who come up to me all the time and they say, you're a criminal lawyer. We want to talk to you because we want to be prosecutors. And I always tell them, you should have higher aspirations for yourself than that. You really want to be a great lawyer. I said, you can't be the person that walks into every game holding all the cards. The guy across the table from you that's got to play the cards he's been dealt, yeah, he's going to lose a few times, certainly at the outset. But at the end of 10 years, who's going to be a better poker player? Be a trial lawyer. Fight against the odds. Fight against the government. I don't know if there's some prosecutors here. I know the judges and prosecutors hate for me to say this, but it's the truth. To close it off, let me just give you a few little things I say to students. One of the things, I was inspired by Gandhi. And he always said, with respect to the beginning of the movement, he said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in service to others. And I think there's people all over the room that are devoted to that and understand what that means, how to make their life fulfilling and meaningful, is to serve others. Kim always likes me, my wife, likes to tell him about what you do for money. Let me just say this. What you do for money, for compensation, will support you. What you do for free, pro bono, will define you. That is going to be who you are. And one last thing that I always like to say, because I always hear this from the judges and the prosecutors, they'll tell you, you got to look out for your reputation, because your reputation is all you got. I know you've heard that from some of these guys. And I always tell them, if that's all you got nothing. If all you got is what other people think of you, and if that's all you're concerned about, you got nothing. What matters is your integrity. It matters what you think of yourself. You know who you are. You know why you say what you say and you do what you do. So if you take care of your integrity, if you do the right thing, your reputation will take care of itself. But I always say, just don't go worry about what other people think of you, because that's just too much of a burden. Anyways, thank you very much.